Joining us on the line right now is attorney Matthew Bergstrom. He represents Nova Firearms and is a managing attorney at Arsenal Attorneys. It's good to have you with us, Mr. Bergstrom.
Good morning.
Listen, right now you represent the folks over at Nova Firearms, and they've been going through some rough times. And it comes at a time when the Commonwealth of Virginia is sort of doing some interesting things regarding permits to carry, reciprocity, things that are being done through executive fiat and decisions by the Attorney General and not through the state legislature. Is the Second Amendment under attack in the Commonwealth of Virginia?
Absolutely. And just like the old saying goes, all politics is local. So the speech and comments that President Obama made last week in the White House, we see it playing out this week in Richmond, in our state capital, as the legislature starts its 2016 session. And now we see it on our local streets in McLean, because tomorrow protesters carrying the same banner will be protesting my client's shop. So we definitely see a battle on all fronts, and I think they're all attacking the Second Amendment.
Well, Matthew, you're an attorney, and what really gets me with liberals and what President Obama is trying to push here in his gun control efforts, if you look at a lot of these northeastern states, they're not even really following the laws in the books, in the sense that they're not turning over the pertinent information to the FBI NICS database that would essentially prevent bad individuals from obtaining guns who shouldn't be obtaining them. You know, we have 20,000 federal and state laws on the books. Can you speak to that hypocrisy and just sort of speak to some of these laws that aren't being implemented and aren't being followed, both on the federal and state level?
Oh, hypocrisy is the key word. You know, the Obama administration has seen a 44% drop in enforcement of the very sort of gun-related crimes that he wants to increase and complicate. And just like you said, we have a lot of laws on the books. We have a lot of big and growing government agencies, and it's all broken. When it's broken, it never gets removed. And I just am concerned about layer upon layer restrictions, because after all, it's always a broad brush. It affects lawful gun ownership. And particularly in the Obama era, there's no effort at consensus building. There's just no recognition of the president about the importance of self-defense. But, you know, there's always the flip side of the coin. As attorney of Nova Firearms, my client has disclosed, or authorized me to disclose to you, that business is booming.
Yeah. Well, let's go to that. Here's cut number 54. 54. The president even admitted as much.
You talked about bitter Americans clinging to their guns. Even now, these executive actions have caused a lot of concern among a lot of people. What is somebody tonight to convince them that you don't want to take away everybody's guns, that you're not coming for their gun?
Well, first of all, Anderson, I think it's useful to keep in mind I've been now president for over 7 years, and gun sales don't seem to have suffered during that time.
If anything, actually, you've helped.
They've gone up. I've been very good for gun manufacturers.
Well, that is true. I mean, they're, right now in the Commonwealth of Virginia, I happen to know also, because I've been talking to some gun shop owners in Maryland. Same is going on in the state of Maryland. They're selling weapons like hotcakes.
That's a fact, and we represent many businesses, the firearms industry, many gun owners, of course, across the country. But let's always step back and look at the big picture. Over the last 20 years, the number of guns in America has doubled. Perhaps there's over 300 million. But the gun homicide rate has dropped by half. So it's just, there's always full of ironies in gun politics. Certainly the president has a knack for announcing plans or making speeches that always seem to backfire.
Well, and Matthew, can we talk about background checks for a moment? Because what I think is interesting is Democrats continue to call for expanding background checks, despite the fact that we have background checks in states across the country. But if you look at a lot of these mass shootings, take Oregon, for example. Oregon has universal background checks, which is as strict as it could possibly get. And the killer there was still able to obtain a gun. Look at Virginia. The shooter passed a background check and was able to obtain a gun. Look at South Carolina. The killer actually shouldn't have passed a background check, but it was a flaw in the FBI database that allowed him to pass a gun. Or you look at San Bernardino. The killer stole a gun from his neighbor. Or, Sandy Hook, the killer stole a gun from his mom. Can you just sort of talk about background checks and sort of Democrats' calls on that and just sort of expand on that for us?
Well, your example from South Carolina with the attack on the church is the most important issue we should focus on, because just like you said, that killer should not have been allowed to buy the gun, but it's the FBI database, the NICS background check system, that failed to flag his application. So again, there's an existing system that's broken that needs to be fixed, but the president wants to build on a broken foundation. Also, what I've learned serving my clients and handling firearms issues is that often gun laws are made by people who know nothing about guns or real life. And when we talk about background checks, we have to think about implementation. So there's always the unintended consequences. So many laws, like Maryland or Oregon, who adopted more restrictions on transfers of firearms, what that means is that if I go hunting or skeet shooting with my buddy, and I hand him my gun, and I walk away to go to the bathroom or go get more ammunition or so forth, that could be called a private transfer. That lacks a background check, and we both committed a crime.
Yeah. Well, listen, very quickly, I know that this is anti-gun protests are taking place out at Nova Guns this weekend. Do you think there'll be some other protesters who have a different opinion about that who might show up?
It's truly, the protests have galvanized supporters of the Second Amendment, and so they've come out in very strong numbers, and they are preparing for the annual lobby day in Richmond on Monday that's organized by the Virginia Citizens Defense League. This is probably the most important year for a good turnout. Every citizen can participate and go meet face-to-face with legislators in Richmond to discuss these issues. But It's really the kickoff tomorrow at 11 a.m. at Nova Firearms is going to really set the scene.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. A great pleasure to have you, Matthew Bergstrom, representing Nova Firearms this morning, 744.